Hey friends, welcome back. Today I'm bringing you another book recommendation video or a video game recommendation video, whichever one you want to take. Because I do think that there is a big crossover between the people that are reading here on BookTube or just like books in general, and also people who either consume cozy games or have some sort of history with gaming in general. So let's marry the two hobbies and give you some recommendations. I want to start with the recommendation that gave me even the idea for this video, and it was a long time ago, last year. When I was reading the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne, I fell in love with the series because it reminded me of Skyrim. I just can't even look at the character names on the back of this book without feeling like I'm gonna cry. Malice is a high fantasy book by John Gwynne, and so much happens in the series, but within this first book you get introduced to a large cast of characters based in the Banished Lands. There's a foretelling of an ancient feud between angels and demons who are destined to fight this god war. There are humans, giants, worms, dregs, and so many more creatures that you're introduced to. It is a classic story of good versus evil. Each side has a champion that are basically put to the test against each other, and each side has their following. It is so good. It is my favorite series, and it would make sense that Skyrim would be paired with it because Skyrim and Malice, they have very similar vibes, in my opinion. Skyrim for me, when I was growing up, was sort of the introduction to a fantasy world, and I quickly became obsessed with it. You are playing as the Dragonborn, and your main quest is to defeat Alduin, the World Eater, who's a dragon that is prophesied to destroy the entire world. Much like many games, there is many side quests, but it is told that the side quests are also so important to the main plot, and just understanding the entire world, how it works, meeting people, gaining skills, that entire thing. I think that the overall vibes of both of these are very similar, and I just kept being put back in the world of Skyrim when I was reading this book. So that's my recommendation to you. If this one doesn't sound exactly like your cup of tea, I would recommend John Gwynne's other book, The Shadow of the Gods, which is book 1 in the Bloodsworn saga, because there's actually just a big dragon that is involved in this plot. So it might be a little bit more directly correlated. I just haven't read The Shadow of the Gods yet, which is surprising, but it is high up on my TBR for sure. Regardless, I think John Gwynne is great. Now, let's bring it back to the very first game that I ever loved. And I guess maybe this game was maybe the first thing that made me realize that I like a fantasy world. So I guess I maybe misspoke a little bit earlier, but both of these, Skyrim and RuneScape, I grew up on. RuneScape doesn't have a central plot, to my understanding. It's basically just an open world where you're basically going around doing random quests, trying to increase your skills and your abilities so that you can take on bigger foes and things like that. It has this almost medieval sort of seriousness to it, but it also is very silly because some of the things that you are able to do or some of the characters or NPCs that you come in contact with are just a little bit funny. And for this recommendation of if you have ever played RuneScape old school or new school, but I am a strict old school girly, I would recommend to you Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan. This book has the classic fantasy vibes. The setting and atmosphere is very similar to RuneScape for me, but it also has the little random bits of humor that Michael J. Sullivan is so good at inserting within his dialogue. And I feel like that matches up with some of the silliness that goes on in RuneScape. Age of Myth is a phenomenal story about a situation where a Frey, which is a seemingly immortal creature, falls to a human's blade. This person, named Wraith, is now deemed the god killer. And this situation is the catalyst that changes the balance of power that this whole world has always known. There's also a seer named Suri who brings this prophecy of basically that the world is ending, that there is a doom upon the horizon. The tagline is "The Age of Myth is over, the time of rebellion has begun." I think that if you really liked RuneScape or are interested in RuneScape, that you could really enjoy The Age of Myth, or vice versa, because both are really stellar options. This next one, I might be cheating just a little bit because I'm going to give you an author. If you have at any point enjoyed a Legend of Zelda game, the author that I want you to try out is Brandon Sanderson. I give you this because The Legend of Zelda, every single game that comes out is very different from another one. They all have similar themes and interconnected storylines in some ways, but I couldn't choose a particular game to talk about because I've loved so many of of them. And then it got me to thinking that maybe if you love like the deep world building and lore surrounding the Legend of Zelda franchise, I think that you could also really like the Brandon Sanderson world, known as his Cosmere. Technically, you really can't start anywhere within Brandon Sanderson's books. Of course, there is like a preferred reading order somewhere on the internet. My recommendation to you is if you are kind of new to fantasy, I would recommend you starting with Trust of the Emerald Sea. I think it's a really accessible, light fantasy story in a sense that it's sort of just a good time. This book makes me happy every single time I think about it. And it's sort of a good introduction to Brandon Sanderson's writing and his humor, because this is written much more like light and airy as opposed to some of his other books, like the Mistborn series, the first one being The Final Empire. Final Empire was my first Brandon Sanderson book, and this trilogy I love. It's one of my favorites. But one of the unsung heroes in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere for me is Elantris. Oh, I've been looking for this bookmark. This has dried flowers from my wedding in it. I didn't know that it was in there, but it matches perfectly. That's probably why it was in there. Love this. Elantris is one of his earliest books, and I think it's in my like top 50 favorite books ever. And I don't really know why. I think that it was just so fun and original, and I loved so much about it. And it has been fun to read across his Cosmere because I can tell that it's one of his earlier books, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I love this story. This is a standalone, at least right now it is. And I also recommend starting with this one as well. But of course, you won't get out of this video without me saying The Way of Kings, book 1 in the Stormlight Archive, is also a great recommendation because it really is just as good as everyone says it is. So many recommendations for this one. If you like Legend of Zelda and that world, then I think that you should try a Brandon Sanderson book and see how you feel. Then there's Animal Crossing. You know it, you love it. It has a special place in my heart as well. Animal Crossing does not really house a central plot other than fixing up your island, greeting new villagers into your town, decorating your town, getting money to renovate your house, collect things, you know. It's like just an alternate world that you can live in for a while. In the newest version, which is New Horizons, you are on this island, and the idea is that you are starting a life from scratch. You start in a tent and you catch fish, bugs, you sell them, you build a museum, and you eventually get a house, and then a house with more rooms, etc., etc. So the central focus point is that you're building something, right? It's cozy, it is just a feel-good time, which is why I have 2 recommendations for you that if you like Animal Crossing, you should read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a fantastic cozy fantasy about our main character Viv, who is an orc. She was a mercenary and she wants to kind of settle down and start her own coffee shop. And it is the best. It's the best. I also really love the sequel, or prequel, I guess, is Bookshops and Bone Dust. I don't know which one I like more, but I think that if you like one, you'll probably like the other one. But in terms of Animal Crossing, I would say Legends and Lattes has like the closest recommendation because it has a lot of fun creatures. The thought of building something from scratch and making friends along the way, Legends and Lattes is your vibe. But also we have A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, which could also match Animal Crossing. This short little sci-fi packs an emotional existential punch. It is about a tea monk and a robot that are going sort of like on a journey together, spiritually and physically. This is following our main character Dex, who is a garden monk who changes their vocation to become a tea monk. They're basically taking their little cart around to different human populations and crafting the perfect tea for whatever the person wants or needs. And they are struggling with the sense that they have everything, yet they are still unhappy. And they're trying to sort of find a purpose. And along the way, they run into a robot who is sort of honoring the time-old tradition that used to be more prevalent, in that the robot is checking in. Literally just checking in. Asking the time-old question of what do people need? And so they kind of go on this journey together. And it is just so heartwarming, a feel-good sort of thing that I could see myself rereading multiple times in this lifetime. Very similar attitude I have towards Animal Crossing. I think that this is a game that I will always play. It has such a deep root in my childhood that has continued into my adulthood. And finding books like this have just sort of furthered my love for both things. Let's do a little fun one. I wanted to recommend you books if you like Luigi's Mansion. Basically, Luigi is playing like Ghostbusters. You know, he's going into this mansion and having to exterminate the ghosts. To my understanding, that is the game. And of course, you know what type of book recommendations you're getting. It's going to be sort of like a haunted house vibe. And my favorite haunted house story is The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. I love this book so much. It's about our main character, Adrian, who inherits the house unexpectedly, and she goes because she literally has nowhere else to live. But everyone in the town knows about Ashburn House, knows about its dark past and all of the rumors that surround it. Something twisted lives in the house, its hungry eyes ever watchful. Chasing the threads of a decades-old mystery, it isn't long before Adrian realizes she's become prey to something deeply unnatural and intensely resentful. A little more serious than the cutesiness of Luigi's Mansion, but it's a haunted house. The vibes are definitely there. And then I also wanted to recommend you The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. I love this book as well. This is my second favorite haunted house story. There is a subplot of a romance to it as well. This book is following our main character Beatrice, whose father was executed in the overthrow of the Mexican government. And when handsome Don Rodolfo proposes to Beatrice, she sort of jumps on the opportunity of having a secure place to live, despite the rumors of his first wife's strange disappearance. She is then moved into the Hacienda San Isidro. However, it is not the sanctuary that she imagined. The doorways are marked with strange symbols. There's black copal burning all the time. No one is really answering her questions, and no one wants to stay in the house past sunset with her. There's a lot of things going on within this storyline. I love the characters and I love the plot so much. If you love a haunted house game, I really think that you could love one of these, or if not both of these haunted house stories. Listen, if you love the game Unpacking, which is literally just a cozy game of you unpacking boxes throughout your main character who you don't ever meet, you're unpacking her boxes as she grows up. Through the unpacking process, you're watching her and her belongings evolve over time, evolve into the person that she is becoming and realizing who she is. My recommendation for you is Old Enough. This book has such a special place in my heart. Look up the trigger warnings for it because it does cover some more serious topics, but it is predominantly a coming of age story as our main character is moving into college and for the first time in her life feeling comfortable around the people that she is surrounding herself with. Predominantly the queer community, as she has finally come out as bisexual. But there are a lot of things that she went through in her childhood that she still has not come to terms with and she is sort of working through. And this book made me sob. I love it a lot. And I think that this recommendation is really solid. Okay, next is a franchise that I just loved growing up, and that is Kirby. And I've decided to give you a recommendation based off their most recent game, which is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, because I do feel like this game can be directly correlated to just like an urban sci-fi dystopian. Within the game, Kirby is transported to this forgotten city and is having to obviously defeat some unknown evil. For this one, I enlisted the help of my friend Emily, who is my chaotic shelf over on Instagram. I'll link her down below. You should definitely please check her out because she is my sci-fi and dystopian girly. And together, but mostly on Emily's brilliance, we came up with two recommendations for you. The first one is City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. It is the first book in his Divine Cities trilogy, and it's about a young diplomat, Shara, who is sent to the mysterious city of Bulakov to catch a murderer. Shara and her brawny henchman Sigrid arrive in Bulakov and are faced with the plot to overthrow the Sapuri authority and restore a divine regime. With the plots of the game and this book are sort of like directly correlated. It totally makes sense. I have not read this book, but since now that it is on my radar, especially directly correlated to this Kirby game, I would be excited to check it out. One that I have read that we decided is sort of like Kirby as well is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shannah McGuire. This is book 3, I think, in the Wayward Children series, the first one being Every Heart a Doorway. I don't know why I ever thought I should tab this way, but I like keep them in here like this just to remember my roots, remember where I started, you know? But this is a fantasy series. All of them are very short. They're surrounding the idea that there are children that find doorways to their perfect world. Sometimes these children are forced back into the real world and they are sent to Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which we are closely following in book 1 and getting sort of the grounding of what the series is going to be about. And in the further books, we're experiencing the children sometimes getting back into their worlds and going on little quests or trying to get out of sticky situations. And this one, Beneath the Sugar Sky, is following some of the children that you meet along the way in the first and second book, going back into this sort of like sugary land, which is like obviously the vibes of this cover are very similar to Kirby, but there still is a darkness within this world. So there's whimsy, there's danger, there's sort of that like old nostalgia and aesthetic between the two. This is a great series and you should definitely check it out. Moving into our final 2 recommendations, I also enlisted the help of one of my good friends, Daryan, who also has a booktube channel. I'll link her down below. She helped me with these 2 recs because I have played one of them a little bit and have yet to delve into another. So the one that I have played, but still wanted some help making sure that the recommendation was solid, is the game Cozy Grove. The premise of Cozy Grove is that you are a spirit scout sent to this island to help a bunch of like ghost bears come to terms with things and move on to the afterlife. You basically have to help them through a series of tasks in order for them to move on. Along the way, you realize that these bears are really struggling with a lot of things. It is one of the prettiest games I've ever played. I love the art style, and it has this like emotional impact that you're not exactly expecting. And after talking with Daryan, the recommendation that we both have for you, which is so solid and is one of my favorite books of this year, is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. One, the word bear is literally in the title, and you are helping ghost bears move on into their afterlife. But also, at surface level, both of them are very cute. You know, this is a small town who thrives on their junior hockey league. And the city's sort of livelihood is sort of riding on the fact that their junior hockey team, if they win the like nationals or whatever tournament that they're in, they could get a lot of sponsors and a lot of money income for their city. And it's a lot of pressure to put on this young group of boys. And evidently something happens within the lives of these children that send the entire organization, but also the entire city, I almost said world, but the entire city into disarray. We're learning about these characters' deep regrets. We're learning about these characters and their complex situations. And this is one that I also might recommend looking up trigger warnings for. But one thing that I will say is that by the end of the book, like, yes, I sobbed, like ugly cried for at least 20 minutes, but it was the most like worth it book that I've read in like ever, maybe ever. So this was one recommendation for Cozy Grove for sure. Then I was talking with my Patreon, and one of my friends, Heather, recommended Sheets. This is a graphic novel by Brenna Thumler, one of my favorite types of art styles for a graphic novel. And this one also is focusing around the subject of death and grief, which matches perfectly with Cozy Grove. So thank you so much, Heather, for bringing this to my attention. We have our main character, Marjorie, who is a practical 13-year-old, and then also Wendell, who is a ghost. Wendell is a boy who lost his life much too young. His daily routines are ineffective death therapy, a sheet-dependent identity, and a dangerous need to seek purpose in the forbidden human world. When Marjorie and Wendell's worlds collide, Marjorie is confronted by inexplicable disasters as Wendell transforms the laundromat into his midnight playground, appearing as a mere sheet during the day. And they strike a unlikely friendship. However, Wendell doesn't know that while he's attempting to create a new afterlife for himself, he unknowingly sabotages the life that Marjorie is struggling to maintain. So there's some sort of conflict there. I have not read it, so I can't like recommend it with my entire chest, but it looks cute and it matches the game of Cozy Grove pretty perfectly. Okay, the last one, debatably the one maybe everyone was waiting for, is Stardew Valley. This is the game that I have had on my Switch for like a better part of a year now, and I just have yet to play it because the thought of diving into a game like this, I know that it's going to consume me, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried about how much time it's going to take away from the rest of my life. So I have not yet played it, but I love the art style of it. I love how obsessive everyone is over this game. I think it is just a great little community. And that is what this book sort of centers on. It is a community-based game where you inherit this, maybe your grandfather's farm. And since this is a game that I haven't yet played, but definitely wanted to include, I was doing like so much research, trying to provide the best possible recommendation that I could for this game. Reddit seemed to really love the book Beware of Chicken, but again, I enlisted Daryan to help me because she has loved this game, and she gave a recommendation that I am trying to actively read, and I'm really excited about it. And she had said The Raven Boys, or The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. She said this would work because the atmosphere and vibes are on point, and it's based in a small town where you get very acquainted with all of the different characters involved. She said it's told in a very slice of life way, but has a little bit of magic, and there's also a romance involved and apparently exploring in caves. The found family and the sense of quest and adventure is really what made her think that these two go together, and I'm inclined to agree. This is one that I can't wait to read. I think it's going to be on my fall TBR at some point. That's the end of my list, but if you have any other recommendations for these games in particular, please put them down below in the comments so that other people can read them and get even more recommendations. But if you don't know what else to say down below in the comments, then leave me either the controller or the book emoji down below in the comments, depending on what side of recommendations you are most likely to take from. And while you're down there, please do subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another, and happy reading and or gaming. Bye!